Hey guys, welcome to Short Takes, episode 1. This is my distilled version of my BitChute series, and this is going to be the distillation of my 4-part series on Clintonism. So I just wanted to take everything that you may have conceived about Clintonism and has been told to you by the media or anyone who isn't me and just throw it in the garbage. It's useless. It's worthless. It's trash. You see, your people's minds have been kind of eaten away by sound bites and Pokemon and culture wars garbage, and they can't see past the fact that Clintonism is by its very definition, a reactionary movement. Now, by reactionary, I mean it essentially keeps the politics of the United States in a state of stasis. That's all it needs to do because their new left roots as a kind of, hippy dippy student activist are total bullshit. All right, first of all, Clinton has made this myth that he's a man of the people, right? Who went to he's poor from Arkansas, and he lifts himself up by going to a good school, which is like the founding myth of neoliberal meritocracy. And he goes to work for political operators, and he goes to basically spy on the student movement for for his political bosses. And the same with his wife. She basically became the middle woman between her and the college administration, and basically said of the kids who got the fuck beat out of them in 1968 in Chicago that they shouldn't have provoked the Republicans. They shouldn't have provoked them, which um, which kind of shows the sort of cynicism and nihilism of their position because they never really believed in anything. They got these fake New Left roots, no real ideology. It's kind of a So for the record, they didn't really oppose the Vietnam War. They weren't hippies, all right. They might have partied with the cool kids, the hippies, but they weren't one of them. And so they kind of come out of this marriage between left and right. So the ideological void gets filled with their love of IPAC and Reagan and all this other garbage. And that's their real roots. So the version you might have got was that their roots look something like this, in which they're kind of a compromise between the hippies and the more moderate left. But really, they're the offspring of these, first of all, the Cold War liberals. Second of all, you got the Reagan Democrats, because centrist Clintonism, centrist left liberalism, was created by backstabbing. You you look at all their advisors, all the people around them, they are consummate backstabbers. So these Cold War libs, near I remind you, were the basically the pro CIA, pro Cold War, pro military industrial complex branch of the Democratic Party. So this is where the original neoconservatives came from, the original OG neocons. And so when they created the kind of neoconservative movement through people like Paul Wolfowitz, through the National Review, through the Project of the American Century, their roots were actually to the left of what was essentially the roots of Clintonism, which became the Democratic Leadership Commission. Now, again, they are actually successful. When I say reaction, they are the most successful reactionary movement. I don't mean that they are the most reactionary successful movement. I'm saying that their ability to backstab from within the party has made their policy of shifting the nation rightward a success that the other party could only dream of. Which is why that people like Chris Hedges say that the last really liberal progressive president was actually Richard Nixon, because he felt the pressure, and because of that he had to enact a lot of reforms, a lot of civil rights type things, a lot of pro environment type things. that you wouldn't freaking see for a while, all right? But what the DLC did is they successfully got them to say that they wanted to be more like Reagan. Now, you combine that with the fact that people like Henry Scoop Jackson, who is like the seed from which all neoconservatism springs from, was actually to the left of what the Democratic Leadership Commission was trying to do. So when you combine the fact that the neoconservatives, what made up the new ideology of the Conservative Party came from some extent from Trotskyism and from Henry Scoop Jackson, that means that, yeah, their roots are leftward of Clintonism. Now you could say maybe the end result maybe might not have ended up that way, but the fact that Clintonism was by its definition an ideological void that was aimed at suppressing the their left is basic. I think that that does it. If you dispute that, you're bullshitting me. I'm sorry. So what Bill does is he tries this strategy of trying to shift the Democrats' rightward for 7 years, and when they finally win, they go, "Oh, look at us! We're the winners. We're the party of victory." All right, and they're actually at this point, their foreign policy is to the left of, or to the right of Bush Senior. And by that I mean he's more beloved by AIPAC, which means he's going to expand the U.S. military state, the U.S. empire. So he starts new wars, but with a friendly face. He gets the Bosnian War, he bombs Iraq, Sudan, gets NATO intervention. He promotes militarism with this kind of saccharine liberal veneer. And because of this, he gets more money than the Republican Party. And this is in a period in which media is increasingly centralized and increasingly you get all these right-wing organizations. And he actually passes laws to move it further in that direction. So he shifts the Democratic Party leftward for 7 years, right? From about 1985 to 1992. Now, when the Republicans finally take over Congress, which they hadn't done in years, mind you, his people, like Dick Morse, who backstabs him, decide that he needs another shift rightward. Now this comes from all their own things. This isn't something I'm imposing on them. Let me read you something from Bill Clinton when he was talking to the Democratic Leadership Commission or Council. He says, "Then we had to go area to area to abandon those false choices, the sterile debate whether you would take the liberal or conservative position that only succeed in dividing America and holding us back." Which means he basically says he doesn't have any ideology, and but the vacuum kind of basically means that he's shifting rightward. But despite all this, he's able to create this sort of false reality because he's got all his friends, all his good connections, right? Speaking of connections to powerful people, I'm gonna talk about Epstein. Yes, and okay, so this is probably going to be covered by every paranoid and even normal critic of neoliberalism on YouTube. But people have noticed that when politicians get sexual blackmail or like there's some sort of sex scandal, they tend to be very hawkish. They tend to start wars. There's a whole movie about this, like Wag the Dog. There was but if you factor in that this might be some sort of blackmail type operation, which I've outlined on this chart, I can go into my deep dive, but now, the Monica Lewinsky affair was like a global phenomenon. So if you're gonna pretend that a Clinton presidency wasn't fucking embarrassing, here's a little story. So Mullah Omar, he comes out of his mountain cave and he says, if the attack on Afghanistan is Clinton's personal decision, then he has done it to divert the world and the American people's attention from that shameful White House affair that has proved that Clinton is a liar and a man devoid of decency and honor. which is fucking hilarious. I don't want to give credit to the Taliban, but that was a big dick move. And it also pushed the plan for Afghanistan back to over to go into war in Afghanistan for Mohammed back a couple years because it was like it was totally discredited. Which brings me my next point, which is basically all the George Bush era wars were had all their everything was already set in place in the 90s. So it was all under Clinton. It was just he dragged his feet a little bit. That was it. I mean, his own advisors said that his policy didn't actually differ from Bush Senior. His foreign policy didn't differ from Bush Senior's. And not only that, but when Hillary Clinton voted for the Iraq War, not only did she get the advice from her husband's advisors, who basically metastasized into the Democratic Party like a cancer, but she thought it was something she already voted yes on, so yeah, yes again. She thought it was just the sanctions again, or, killing 500,000 children, whatever. And, in her Senate career, she didn't really do much besides support Bush's foreign policy because he gave her $20 billion to rebuild Wall Street. So what you have is this largely astroturf movement that's basically sold out so much that all they have is winning. AstroTurf is when they basically trick you into thinking they're more popular than they are with money. But they're so right on point in with the what the neocons, the people around Bush who basically planned these wars wanted, that a lot of them switch over to the Clinton side in 2014, which is actually before the Russian interference thing. People actually have it backwards. The intelligence agencies were already pushing the things about Russian influence, and it wasn't just against Trump. It was against Bernie. It was against Rand Paul. But Clinton took to it like a fly to shit because her instincts had moved so rightward that these sort of neocon boomers, the pundit class, the John McCains, they became the sensible people to her. So of course it sounded good. Like when she thought she found the big boof, the big fuck you mom to Donald Trump, it was like the multicultural Muslim Gold Star family who's like, oh, our son didn't die shooting Iraqi children for this. So the circle jerk of the professional classes, the pundits, the journalists, they when Trump gets elected, they lose their shit, but they also lost their shit when Bernie was gaining traction, and Bernie gaining traction constrained the Clinton campaign from like mobilizing the intelligence community against on Clinton's side. So really, Trump couldn't have won without Sanders because both the Sanders supporters and the Trump supporters made clear that they would not tolerate being cheated out of the election. But once he wins, that's when the brakes come off and they can say all this Russian collusion stuff because Clinton needed to blame somebody. But also, if she didn't, she wanted to blame the media, but the media had it misdirected from them by blaming Russia. But ironically, this is kind of what happens in a classic Marxist revolutions. You get the kind of working class kind of represented, at least symbolically, by Trump, and then you get these students and some more workers from the Bernie side, and they come together and they overthrow two political dynasties, and they get out a DNC chair. This is huge. It's because that is how the people like the DLC were able to move the Democratic Party rightward for so long, and how they were able to move them towards war. It's bottlenecked. It's rigged like that, and that's how they rig it. The Russian collusion thing is bullshit, but it will not die because the intelligence agency needs it to throw shade on Trump. The journalists need it because they need their credit. They need to deflect from how often they've been wrong. The Clinton needs it because she needs to answer for the her investors who lost like fucking millions of dollars. And the neoliberals need it because their entire philosophy is based on their ability to win. They sold out for nothing. They used Trump as their Pied Piper for fucking nothing. They funded Al Qaeda in Syria for nothing. They brought slavery back to Africa for nothing. So when someone says Russia, don't use logic. Call their bluff. The nukes are coming. Buy a bunker. The KGB are among us. The Cold War is back and we're all targets. My friends, facing consequences is the only path to sanity again.